Hey, you paleo pundits, let's talk about paleo. Now, paleo is one of those diet plans that's not a diet plan. The way I see it, it's an eating style, and I think it has a lot of validity. What I like about the paleo or the primal or the caveman diet is that it's not based on calories, it's not based on counting, it's not based on apps. It's about choosing food sources. Particular food sources that are healthy, and it's basically a whole foods diet. So basically their premise is they have two aspects that they stick to. We adapted to eating a certain way as primates, and that we need to continue to eat that way in order to stay fit and strong and healthy and to negate the chronic diseases that we are suffering from today. So, okay, that kind of makes sense. So basically, things shifted about 10,000 years ago with the advent of agriculture. So we went from nomadic hunter-gatherers, the modern day humans about 50,000 years ago were people that looked like us, and then they shifted from the nomadic having to travel around because they started farming, and so they became stationary, and that was 10,000 years ago. So basically, what they're saying is that was the start of the downfall of the human body, but there are some flaws in this. So basically, the paleo is about eating animals and animal spin-offs like egg and honey. They ate roots and tubers and leaves, which are basically veggies. They ate a lot of fruits and nut seeds. So basically, is the paleo really paleo? Not necessarily, because you can't take a snapshot of how we ate 10,000 years ago and not apply all the other variables to it. We can't just bring it forward into today and say, well, that's how they ate and they were really healthy, and that's how we need to eat today. Because two things: number one, they weren't that healthy because a lot of them were starving to death. But number two, the body has evolved and is meant to evolve over time. So you can't just pluck something from here and plop it in here and expect it to work. It gets dragged through time, and our bodies have amazing ways of adapting. So this is something that gets lost when we talk about the snapshot argument of paleo. So basically, when we look at fruits and veggies back then, they were very different. They were very small. They were very bitter. They didn't constitute a lot of the diet because they were hard to come by. And so today's fruits and veggies, I mean, they wouldn't even recognize our fruits and veggies. They didn't have broccoli back then. They didn't have bananas back then. It was a very different bounty of fruits and veggies today. The animals have changed. Obviously, their animals were organic, but they had bison, they had elk, they had deer. We don't eat those today. And if we do, it's because some guy went out and shot one, on his once-a-year hunting trip, and we got to eat it. But most of that stuff is still farmed. And let's not even talk about commercial meat, because we are assuming as a healthy person that you are choosing grass-fed local meats. But the meats have definitely changed. The beasts have changed. The inners and the outers have changed of those beasts as well. We have to keep that in mind. And science and research has indeed shown through digs and through archaeological aspects that the primal human beings that we know of as cavemen did in fact eat grains and did eat legumes. They have found them on traces on their tools. They found them in their campsites. They have found them in their digestive tracts, whatever that may look like. I don't want to think about that. But they did indeed eat grains and legumes. And so we have to start being more flexible with a snapshot, a romantic snapshot of primal human beings. And so we also have the argument about anti-nutrients. So paleo people will say, well, anti-nutrients like phytic acid is not healthy, and that's what you find in grains. And that's what you find in nuts and legumes. Well, phytic acid is found in a lot of foods, and just like anything, if you eat them to extreme, the phytic acid is negative. But if you look at berries and you look at spinach, it has oxalates. And so those are anti-nutrients too, because they block the absorption of calcium. Well, in extreme, if you're eating like spinach till it's coming out your ears, you might have a calcium absorption issue. But we manage that by not going into extremes. And so there's a lot of anti-nutrients in foods that naturally are negated because we're eating a rounded diet. So we can't use the phytic acid. So the grains and inflammation argument is also a big one. But when we talk about grains and inflammation, is you need to understand that the grains that we have today are not necessarily healthy grains. So they're processed grains. So if you grow your own wheat kernels and you make your own bread from those wheat kernels, you have a totally different sodium to potassium environment than you would with grains or with wheat that you're going to buy at the store, because they have changed over the decades. The farming has changed, but that's not to say that grains aren't healthy. So processed grains, which is what a lot of people reach for, processed grains in breads, in wraps, in different fast foods, the grains are in there, and they're blaming the grains and saying grains create inflammation. No, they're just lousy grain sources. If you chose whole, unrefined grain sources, you're not going to have the same issues. So again, apples to oranges here. We have to look at that. We also have to look at changes in our gastrointestinal tract, our GI tract. The bacteria that we have in our bodies is way different than the bacteria we had in our bodies 10,000 years ago, because we've evolved and we're supposed to evolve. And so what they found was 8,000 years ago, when Paleo did in fact drink milk from animals, our bodies have evolved so that now 40% of the population have the lactase enzyme, which digests lactose. And so we don't have the same abundance of lactose intolerant people. And that's a big issue to understand, because our bodies are meant to evolve. So as our foods and our environments and our DNA has changed, as we move around the earth with different cultures, our digestive tract changes too. The Inuit have a different digestive tract and different bacteria than the Polynesians, than the Asians. And so this is really important to understand. The body has an amazing way of adapting over time and according to different foods and according to different cultural differences and also geographical differences as well. So the body has an amazing way to adapt, and we've seen this when it comes to changing the bacteria, different enzymes in the body, different response to increasing and adding in dairy and legumes and whole grains, which is what a lot of paleo say are not what they want. And so paleo is starting to open up. They're starting to be a little bit more flexible in their understanding and their acceptance of a paleo diet, and not being so stringent about, well, they didn't eat that back then, so we shouldn't eat that now. Says who? And the research is flawed. They did in fact eat that, and our bodies change necessarily in a proper way so that we can then eat according to what we have growing, because that's the body's survival. So there's flawed evolutionary logic here that we can throw at the paleo zealots, the ones that are pure paleo, and say it's about understanding that we can progress. What I like about paleo is that it is based on a whole foods diet, and it's based on clean foods, and it's based on not counting and not getting caught up in apps and not getting caught up in diet plans. It's basic and it's clean and it's real, and it is making us understand that we need to get rid of the processed foods, and we need to start looking at whole foods, and we need to start integrating that into our daily life and keeping it simple. So paleo wins for me as long as they stay flexible in their approach and their understanding, and they understand that you can't hammer in with the research, because the research isn't necessarily there. You don't need research to support your way of eating. It's a really good style of eating in my books. All right, ciao.